Hello, hello. Hi, Taryn.
Hello, Natalia.
I am very excited to see you once again in another screen, but in a very different way. I'm super excited to be here, and I'm excited to have some people joining as well. And we're going to talk about community feedback today, right, Taryn?
Yes, we are.
All right. So, just as a heads up for everyone joining, please, whatever platform you're using to listen and watch us, you can drop your comments, questions, anything in the chat, and we can see that and we will read you and answer. Other than that, I think we can go ahead and get started. All right. So, today we're going to be talking about gathering community feedback and hopefully find a way to do that in practical ways, but also thinking about what that really means for Purpose Possible and hopefully for you all joining us today. This is what our time together is going to look like. We're going to go over some introductions in a second. We're going to talk about community feedback and kind of what it means to us, our philosophy around it, some common misconceptions around what community feedback can look like or be like, and what are the benefits from our perspective. And then finally, we're going to have a time together to design feedback together and kind of go through a more interactive version of how Taryn and I put these together in our day to day at Purpose Possible. But let's go ahead and start with who is here. Why are we the ones talking to you today? I'll let Taryn go first.
Hello, friends. My name is Taryn Janelle. I am a consultant in the Purpose Possible's organizational strategy vertical. I am a senior consultant, and I've been with Purpose Possible for about 5 years here, coming off of a long career as an arts administrator, and consultant in community-based organizations.
And I am Natalia Garzón Martínez, and I am also in the organizational strategy team with Taryn. I also do some communications work for Purpose Possible. And yeah, I do most of my strategic plans, art and culture plans, succession plans with Taryn. And so her and I have been in this for a while and have been thinking about community feedback for quite a bit. And so we are excited to share that with you today. So, why do we think community feedback is important? Why are we here? One of the things that we find very important whenever we do any of these projects, whether it's a strategic plan, a feasibility study, an arts and culture plan, is the importance of listening to different voices. A lot of times we have kind of an ongoing list of who we ask for advice, who we ask for opinions. But when we're engaging different voices that maybe are not always part of the conversation, it makes community feedback a lot more nuanced and a lot more sustainable and important for whatever question you're asking or whatever project you're asking it for. We also believe that community feedback is an opportunity to involve the opinions of those who are actually impacted by the changes. And immediately I'm thinking of staff, right? Having a survey where you are asking staff how they feel about a strategic plan, for example, is important because they are the ones that are going to be impacted by the changes, but also implementing those changes. And what that creates, having different voices, including people that are going to be, affected by whatever change you decide to implement, is collective buy-in. In the end, when you have more voices and you have multiple voices, they will also feel ownership and accountability for whatever project you are embarking on. So we do this in many different formats. We sometimes put out digital surveys. We use SurveyMonkey for that, but we also use Google Forms. Sometimes we have interactive public meetings where we invite the public for whatever audience the organization is looking into to come and give us their input about certain topics. We also have one-on-one interviews, typically 45 minutes to an hour, where we ask more specific questions to a specific individual about a project. And we also have focus groups. And so that might be a group of people that represent one audience segment. And so we organize a focus group that's a little more intimate, but still allows us to get kind of the breadth of information that we need from a specific audience. And Why this is important, like I said, when you have more voices and you include more voices in your community feedback, then you're going to have other things that are very beneficial for you and for your organization. First, you're going to have more breadth, right? The more voices that you include, then the richer that data is going to come back. And you're also going to be revealing just a more in-depth explanation of what you're of what you're looking into. Science ATL, we know you too. Impact, more voices, more impact. Why? Because when people are feeling included and they feel valued, then your work is also going to earn deeper trust and greater impact, right? If a person is brought into the fold of a project early on and they're being held accountable and through every step of the way, they're going to feel included, they're going to feel valued, they're going to trust you and the organization more. And as I said in the previous slide, you have more voices, you have more collective buy-in. When you invite different voices into this process, then you're building ownership. And what that does is for the long term, let's say you have a strategic plan, you're creating buy-in, because if you have a strategic plan that's say 3 to 5 years, and you're asking, your program participants, your staff, what they think about that strategic plan, that's already establishing a sense of trust that is going to trickle throughout the life of that strategic plan. And it's going to increase that engagement and that trust in whatever you are deciding to change for your organization. And now pass it on to Taryn for philosophy.
Yes. So as Natalia mentioned, Purpose Possible, we gather community input in for a variety of different projects. We have the strategic planning process, which of course is a great time to talk to program participants and the people impacted by the work. But we also do cultural planning projects, and that's on a bigger scale, right? More community. Maybe we're looking at workers in a space. You're looking at folks that are inhabiting certain areas of a community, things like that. And anytime we're going into any community input, we're going to ask ourselves the same questions, no matter what the project is, right? We're going to ask ourselves, who are we engaging, right? Is it workers? Is it program participants? Is it staff and board? We're going to ask, what are we trying to accomplish or understand? What are the insights that we want to get back from each of our stakeholder groups? And then how? How will we engage with them? How will we learn from them? And also, how will we act on the information that we have gained? As you're going through these 3 questions, you're going to ask yourself a couple of other sub questions up underneath the main question, right? So for who's most impacted by the work, and are they here at the table able to have this conversation with us? Who are our natural partners and advocates in this space? And then who are we missing in our normal outreach efforts, and who can we use this opportunity to steward a little bit? For the what, we want to ask ourselves what issues matter most to the community at large, or the community that we're serving. What does success look like from their point of view, right? It's very important to ask this question, because we all know, especially being entrenched in the work, what we think success looks like. But asking that really specific question to your community is able to broaden the scope of what success could look like and how that could be implemented in the community. And then what barriers might limit access or voice? And when you're thinking about barriers, this could also encompass a fair amount of things. But one of the easiest is, what time are they available to talk to you? Right? When can you actually get these people in the room? What kinds of jobs are they doing? Where can you find them doing the things that they do? And how can you kind of meet them where they are? And then that how are we inviting people to share their input, right? Those formats that Natalia spoke about, and we'll get a little bit deeper into a little bit later. How are we meeting folks where they are? Are we taking into consideration that we would like to speak to mothers, and there's a variety of different places that we may be able to find them? And even more specific, are you speaking to maybe mothers of young children, and the time of day is really, really important? How are we listening with intention and without assumption? Have you already answered the questions that you're asking before you've walked in the room? Or are you allowing the people you're talking to guide the way that you're thinking about this insight or this topic? So, How do you decide on who you are talking to? Well, we like to look at it as kind of a ring or a succession of rings going out, starting with the center. The center is you, it's the organization, it's the work that you do. And then you go out from there. And as you get further and further out, those are further and further away from the work, right? So your staff, they're going to be the closest to the center. They know exactly what's going on. They know how you do your work. They know how it's being messaged out. And you're going to get a certain insight from them that is even different from the board, which is another ring out. They're, of course, going to be also very familiar with the work, but maybe not familiar with operations, right? And the things that are going on, the culture from day to day. You're going to ask your organizational partners, and this could look like a variety of different things. This could be people or organizations that you partner with, but it could also be volunteers are your organizational partners, right? Folks that know about your work, probably don't know about the strategic plan, right, that the board may know, probably don't know about the culture that the staff may know, but they're still kind of intimately involved with the work because they've partnered with you to do this work. From that point on, now you're getting to a little bit of external partners. Those would be your philanthropic partners. And this could be institutional donors or your individual donors, folks that are committed to the work, that are supporting the work, and are committed to the outcomes that the work is bringing. And then you have civic and community leaders. This may or may not be a ring for your organization, but it is a ring out there, not as close in as maybe your philanthropic partners that are supporting this work, but they are very much impacted by this work and could partner with you to bring your vision to fruition and their own if you find alignment on community needs. And then that last one out would be your program participants. And of course, this is your audience, it's the community at whole. If you're a school, it's maybe students and parents, right? Who are the people that are in the community that are really the most impacted by the work, or the people that you're targeting? Who's your audience? That would be in that outer ring. And of course, they're the furthest away from the actual operations of your organization, right? So you're going further and further out and learning different things from each of these stakeholder groups. What are those things we're trying to learn? Natalia, you can go ahead and advance. So these are your insights. The what do we want to know from each of these groups? Now, this could change, of course, depending on your organization, but here at Purpose Possible, we found that each of those rings, that if you add too many stakeholders, the rings will start to kind of merge together, and that each of those rings has really a key insight that you can get to in a variety of different ways. So as you're working closer to that center, you have the staff again, and they're going to be wanting to know about, they're going to be able to tell you rather about the work and the culture of the organization, right? Those really intricate operational details. Going out from there, you have a board that be able to talk to you about the organizational strengths and opportunities, things that they see, and then how they also fit into that work. So this is also an opportunity to talk more about the support that they might need to help get the word out about the great things that you are out there doing. As you go further out, then we're asking how the collaboration with our partners, those organizational partners, shapes their perception of the organization. And you'll notice that we put their perception because, of course, we don't want to answer any questions for them before we get into the space. We want to know how they feel. So then the next one, your philanthropic partners, how they understand and evaluate the mission, the effectiveness, and the community impact. What are the things that they're looking for to understand the impact of their support, right? This could look in a couple of different ways, right? Some very tangible kind of numbers and quantitative data, but also the things that are storytelling and things that are not as easily nailed down, but they want to know how are the people that are actually getting the benefits of your work, how do they feel about the work that you're doing? That government officials, kind of civic leaders space, they're going to want to know, or we're going to ask them how they perceive the organization's role in addressing community needs, right? What's their platform, and how does our work help them communicate their platform and get to the crux of the work that they're trying to do? And then that last one, the program participants, your audience, we're going to ask them how they experience the value of the organization in their own lives from a very individual standpoint. We can ask about specific programs and their effectiveness. We can ask about their ability to engage in programs, right? This is how you can ask about maybe a membership program that you have and why or why not people may be engaging with that. And then, of course, within the wider community ecosystem. So you can ask folks that maybe that are just on the mailing list. I say just, but folks on the mailing list that may or may not have been as engaged, and ask them maybe why they are or why they are not. Go ahead. So the how. There are lots of different ways that you can approach your stakeholders now that you know who they are. But we've pulled out a few of them that work for us that we use pretty often. And we're talking about why we think it's effective, and then which of those groups, how do you want to actually approach the different folks, right? So the first one is the one that everybody probably thinks of, which is a survey. A survey is great because you can use it all year long, right? You can use it as a touch point over and over and over again, because it doesn't take any scheduling, whereas interviews and focus groups and public meetings takes a little bit more of a lift to get those folks in the room. And depending on who you are targeting, might be a huge lift, right? Government officials and such, it's going to be a little harder to get them into this space. But a survey can touch anyone at pretty much any time, and it's an excellent tool. It's an efficient way to collect broad feedback from lots and lots of people at one time. And with using tools like SurveyMonkey, you can create one survey that will send them to the type of audience member that they are. And that way you have a smaller lift as well to gather that feedback from everyone. You can use this, though. It is a bit impersonal, right? And you're a touch limited by the amount of time that people are actually going to spend on this survey. So you don't want to have a huge survey, because then you may not have a huge amount of people filling it out, right? I will say the closer you get to the center of that ring, the more questions you can ask them. So staff and board are going to be more committed to what's going on. Your partners are going to be a little bit more committed. You can ask them more questions via survey. As you start to get into those external partners, you want to keep it short. Five questions. I give usually a 5 to 8 maximum for those folks. And then because of that, you're going to want to use it with community leaders, with your volunteers, right? The broad bases, with your program participants. We also have an interview, a one-on-one sit down with any of the stakeholder groups that you're working with. These conversations allow for depth, so you can start with those survey questions, right? And then as you go, you're prompted to ask more questions, to get deeper responses, right? They're sitting right across from you, and you can get a lot more depth of response than someone just kind of filling it out on the survey, right? So you'd be really strategic about who you want to get into that space with you. That's trust building with key stakeholders. Once they know, if there's someone that you know really has a lot to say, that may maybe overpower a focus group, bring them into that interview, give them the time that they would really like to have. Now you've sown some good trust and some good feelings, and you're able to kind of move forward knowing that that voice is heard, but also that other voices can be heard, right? Focus groups then are ideal for really kind of peer-to-peer dialogue, right? So I brought up the example of a school. Maybe if you are a school district that wants to talk to your leaders, your school leaders, the leaders of those schools, the principals, might be in a focus group, right? We're kind of peers. We're talking about the same things. This is a really great opportunity to do some ideation. You can do some really good engaging activities, right? Not just a conversation, but really understanding where a group lands on a particular subject, and gathering insights from those shared experiences that they have, or those shared roles. And so that one's also great for program participants, for organizational partners, and of course for your staff, right? Because then you can ask even more pointed questions with a shared goal at the end. And then the one that's probably the most involved planning wise are your town halls and your public meetings. They are great for community organizations that speak directly to the community at large or a very large subset of the community, because they promote transparency, right? You invite live input. You can again put some activities around the space that where you can get specific insights on specific things like where do you think that this center should be, or what kinds of activities should we have, some really specific questions that you can gather insight from. And then of course they ensure open access to the discussions because you're going to invite the public, you're inviting as many people as you can, so you'll be able to get lots and lots of different perspectives through that. These, of course, are going to be big for communities. You can invite your volunteers to something like this, and any of those organizational partners. This is a really great opportunity to invite them in if you haven't already talked to them via a focus group.
Thank you. And also just a quick reminder that because you RSVP to this webinar, you can get some of these resources after today's presentation. We know that this is a lot of information that we're giving you, so do not worry. You can receive the resources as well.
Yes, ma'am. So let's talk a little bit about some myths, okay? These are things that we hear from clients all the time because, we know this, we know it as an organization, but you just know it as a person. Sometimes asking people what they think is a scary proposition, right? Because they're going to tell you. So the first thing that folks say is, oh, well, should we be really like curating the types of questions? And yes, but should you be curating them to get the answer that you want, or should you be curating them to get the insight that you want, right? And that insight may or may not be what you wanted to hear. So the myth is that you'll get a whole lot of negative feedback. Well, yeah, you're probably going to get some, but also that's good though, right? Because it's valuable. All data is great data. It's telling you, even if you are being told that you don't have this program that you have had for a decade and that you've been putting all these energies into, and people are asking you, why don't you do this thing that you very much do? Well, that's also data. And the data is not we don't do it. The data is how are we communicating what we do to our audience, because they clearly don't know. We know, they don't know. So that's where the discrepancy is, right? So even in the negative, quote, negative data, you're going to be able to find lots of positive insight from that data.
I also feel like one of the myths too tied to this is that all you're going to get is negative feedback. But when you think about that circle that Taryn just explained, if you are collecting feedback from multiple audience segments, there are different insights. And so the feedback is going to look different. For what your staff says is not the same thing that your program participants are going to say. So like, yes, you may get negative feedback from some program participants, but that's going to be offset and almost nuanced by whatever your staff, your board, your partners are saying. And so again, the more breadth that you have, then yes, negative feedback is part of feedback, but it's going to be balanced out with many other opinions.
Yeah, which is in effect giving you a more full picture of what the community actually thinks and what those audiences actually think. So what you're really trying to do is just make space for that, right? And in ways, if you know your audience, do it in the ways that will make sense. Should I be doing this one-on-one interview because I know this person has some really strong feelings and I need to make sure that those are being communicated to me maybe and not to a room at large, right? Or do we really want to hear some of these conflicting things and see where the group really lands after some conversation? And we want to go ahead and put this into a public meeting or a focus group format, right? So then you're making the feedback constructive, you're making it thoughtful, right? You are making sure that you are leaving space for people to tell you how they feel, no matter how that is. The next myth, there'll be too many cooks in the kitchen, that if you involve more voices, that then the message will end up getting muddy. And our pushback on that is that involving more voices doesn't actually mean losing control, right? It means getting more breadth of response. It means gaining deeper insight to support those smarter and more informed decisions, all right? Because the last myth, You don't have to do it. You do not have to do what the feedback says. Just because someone said it doesn't mean that it's true, number one, because you are the closest to your work, or that that's actually the direction that you need to go in. We've had plenty of clients come in, and the board and the staff kind of have an idea of what they would like to be doing. Then you do your community input, and the community is like, I want you to be doing option C way over here that you haven't thought about at all. Well, that's great. And maybe in the future you can consider option C. It's nice to know that what people want to see from your organization. However, you know if you can afford it. You know if you have staff to manage it. You know if you have funders that can fund it, right? Like, you know what the intricacies are. So you don't have to take it. It's input. It's not instruction, right? You're still in charge of interpreting all of that data and then deciding what the best course of action is for you and your organization.
All right. So thank you, Taryn. That was all information we needed to understand for community feedback. And now we want to dedicate the rest of our time together to designing with us. If you have any questions, please share them in the comments. This is going to transition a little bit into a practice kind of interactive section. So if you do have any questions about the first half of what Taryn just shared, please drop those in the chat wherever you're watching, and we will make sure to respond to your questions. So let's go ahead and go through some questions. So the first thing that we wanted to think about was, what's it? Here we go. All right. So when we're thinking about our who and our what, which is, those circles that Taryn explained just now, we want to start by thinking of how you design a survey or any feedback format that you choose, thinking about your audience. So your audience is going to guide your insight, right? Like, what is the insight that we want to get from this specific audience? Then your insight, so whatever information you get from them, is also going to inform your question, how you're framing that question that you're asking. And then the question that you're asking is going to inform the format in which you're going to ask that question. Is it a question that should be in a survey? Is it an open-ended question? Is it dot polling at a public meeting? So all of these pieces kind of flow into each other. And that's what we're hoping to guide you through today, because what we want is for this to be practical for you, and that you can kind of see what we're saying today and then put it in practice in whatever format, in whatever setting you are, and whatever reason you were thinking about for gathering community feedback. So let's start first with audience and insight. So we're thinking again about our who and what we want to gain from this audience segment. And so the way that we are setting this up is we have a question, and the question is the feedback, right? So the insight. So organizational strengths and opportunities and how they fit into that work. That is the insight that we're trying to get. And then what we want to do is figure out who the audience would be for this specific insight. So we have staff, program participants, board, and philanthropic partners. So the idea is that we want you all to match in the comments what audience you think pertains to this insight. Did I explain that right, Taryn? Is that so?
You
okay.
Did. Who of the 4 groups, the audience groups that we have down here, would be focusing, or who would you be asking about the organizational strengths and opportunities and how they would fit into that work?
Correct.
Yep. So you can drop that into the comments. Let us know.
All right. We have someone saying staff and maybe board. Mm-hmm. Should we go with staff or board, Taryn?
Yeah, I was seeing if any other dropped in, but I don't see any more. So yeah, go ahead. Let's see if staff is correct.
Not correct, but board is correct. And they said staff and maybe board.
So let me tell you that you kind of are correct, right? We're definitely going to ask the staff about their organizational strengths and opportunities, and how they would like to be in that work. But we're also going to talk to them about culture and the literal ins and outs of operations. So this one being a little bit more broad about strengths and opportunities, this one's going to go to your board because it doesn't have that next layer down for the actual operations of how the work is getting done. So you were still kind of right.
Yes, I agree. All right, so this is the next one. Again, we have an insight and we want to match that insight to the audience. So the insight is how they perceive the value of the organization in their own lives. I'm going to read that again. How they perceive the value of the organization in their own lives. We have staff, we have program participants, we have board, and we have civic leaders. And we are reading you all in the chat.
Yeah. Who's most concerned with the value of the organization in their own lives? I'm seeing program participants.
All right, let's go with that.
Let's see.
Yay!
Right. That's right, right? The audience, who are you serving? What community do you serve? And what's the value? What are they getting from, what's the impact of the work on them and their own lives? That's right.
All right. Next one, again, we have an insight match to the audience, how they perceive the organization's role in addressing community needs. I'm going to read that again. How they perceive the organization's role in addressing community needs. We have staff, we have program participants, we have civic leaders, and philanthropic partners.
Yeah.
I'll give it a second. Mm-hmm. It was fun to design this kind of going backwards, Taryn. I enjoyed that. In preparing the presentation. I see some participants, but I don't know if that was
civic leaders. That was from the last one. Civic leaders. Okay.
All right, we have civic leaders. Let's see if we get one more.
Let's see. Is it civic leaders?
Yay!
It was, right? How do you, and again, I mentioned at the top, some of these, they can bleed over, right? But if you're trying to be specific about what any of those stakeholders, audience needs, or audience groups actually need what you need to hear from them, this is what civic leaders are going to give you the best insight for, how they perceive your organization's role in addressing the needs of the community that they are serving. There's another group that would be interested in that. That would be all of them, but really your philanthropic partners, right? When you're talking kind of on a broad sense like this, the needs of the community and whether or not those needs are being met, right, mm-hmm. by your organization.
100%. Yep. All right. So another insight, how they perceive the value of the organization in the community and details around their support. Again, how they perceive the value of the organization in the community and details around their support. So again, we have same audience segments. We have board, we have staff, we have philanthropic partners, and program participants. Philanthropic partners, I see in the chat. That is correct.
Yes, of course. Because again, right, like the impact in the community is a different is a different consideration for your philanthropic partners than it is for those community leaders, right? That are the civic leaders that are out there, you know, pushing for this work to be done versus supporting the work being done. And what they really want to know is how the community perceives the value. How much did you actually get done after they provided you with support, right? It's a little bit nuanced when you're thinking about this one versus what the civic leaders are asking for, which is really, hard level impact, and how they can kind of be involved in that. How can I partner with you to make that work get done?
Yep. That's correct. All right. And then we gave it away.
No.
We gave it away. The final one is the work and the culture of the organization. And the audience for this one is the staff. As Taryn was explaining a little earlier, they are the closest ones, right, to the organization. So they are the ones that are going to understand kind of the culture behind it, the ins and out of how things work day to day. And so that really is more of a question for staff members because they are aware of the operational side of the organization.
Yeah.
Anything to add there, Taryn?
Yeah, when you're talking about the culture of the organization, you'll know whether or not you need to have this conversation with your staff, right? Communication challenges, maybe if there's a brand new staff or lots of, like if you've had a transition and turnover has happened, then you might want to talk to the staff about kind of the things that they need, right? But you'll know kind of what questions to actually ask around that, right? There are a variety of different ways that you can kind of approach when you're talking about culture. But what I say is that it's important to consider it, even if you think that you don't need to actually address it, right? Things are going great. You all are going out to Braves games on Fridays, right? All as a group. Like if things are great, maybe you don't have to have a full sit down about it. But if you've sensed maybe some tensions, especially if you're going into a strategic planning process, you want to talk to your staff and ask some really pointed questions. And maybe not you, maybe have someone else, if you're the leader of your organization, ask those questions so that you can promote some privacy and get them to be as candid as possible. But they are the ones that are going to do the work afterwards. So it's a great idea to go ahead and understand what those barriers to being able to get this work done may be floating around inside of the staff.
Yes, correct. I see a comment here. Will this be available to rewatch? And yes, it's going to be available online. And we'll also send this presentation and the resources to anyone that registered. I believe the link to register and make sure you get all of this is in the comments. So you can click that and make sure you get that. All right.
All right. So we have now identified our insight and our audience together, and now we're going for the what and the how. How do we turn what we would like to know, that insight, into an actual question? And I'll let you know there's some nuance here too, right? You can ask the same question in different ways to every single one of these groups and get a completely different insight or a question or an answer that will lend itself to the insight that you need from that particular group. So we're going to go through and look at several different questions and see if we can match the question to the insight that we're trying to gain. The first one, starting from that inside ring, the work and the culture of the organization. So we have 4 different questions, and remembering that nuance that we just talked about, we're going to ask which question best gets to the heart of the insight, right? Those questions here, and there's no letters here, but you can just respond with A, B, C, or D for us, just down the list. So A would be, where do you see opportunities for alignment between our work and public initiatives? And of course, these are questions outward facing on a survey or in whatever format. The second would be, how well do you feel seen and heard and supported here? Question C would be, what outcomes or impact do you most want to see from your support? And then the last one is, what changes or additions would improve your experience?
I see Science ATL. B, 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 B.
Well, I do think we are probably right.
That is correct.
Absolutely. All right. Organizational strengths and opportunities and their role in the work, right? Again, where's that nuance for this particular question? So we're going to ask maybe, where do you see opportunities for alignment between our work and public initiatives? Where do you see opportunities for innovation or improvement in our work? What outcomes or impact do you most want to see from your investments? And what does success look like to you in this space? A, B, C, or D to try to get to those strengths and opportunities and their role. Gets a little harder when you have to try to discern through that wording.
B.
There are less B's, maybe the less confident answer of me, but we're still correct, right? And the key part of that one was the innovation piece, right? Where do you see opportunities for innovation or improvement in the things that we're doing? But I will say, this is a great question to ask your program participants too, probably not phrased in this same way. I probably would not say the words innovation unless you're in a space that consistently talks about innovation, and we do have those. But being really specific about the words that you're using for the different stakeholder groups is going to be important.
For sure.
All right. Their perception of their impact of the organization on community needs for our government officials. Should we ask them, what brought you to our organization and what keeps you engaged? Or what would deepen your confidence in our strategy and approach? What role do you think we can play in advancing shared public goals? Or what support or tools would help you better serve our community? Which one of these questions, A, B, C, or D, do we want to ask to our government officials, civic leaders, as it were? Yeah, it's okay.
We have a mixed C or D.
Yeah. Now, see, I put some of these in here on the same one because of the nuance between the wording, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely think that there's a way to ask that exact same thing. What support or tools would help you better serve our community? Maybe being even more targeted about the actual programs, because you don't know what they may or may not know about what it is you are doing, right? So I would probably try to get a little bit more specific if you were asking D, but it's definitely valid. The one that we've put in here for this one is C. What role do you think we can play in advancing shared public goals, right? Because that's the idea. How can we work with you to get to those shared community goals? But D, also valid. I just probably wouldn't phrase it that way.
Yeah, like you said, I feel like a lot of these, they have a little bit of nuance to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We have two more, I believe. This one and one more.
Yep. So for our philanthropic partners, we're asking how they perceive the value of the organization in the community and details around their support. So some questions we could ask. Are we asking the right questions and listening to your needs? What internal change would make your work easier or more impactful? What community needs are most urgent from your perspective? Or what would help you feel more confident investing in our work long term? So think through that nuance, because these are philanthropic partners. So there's a way to ask some of these other ones. But which one best gets to the heart of what we need to know from this specific group of people?
Right. We have a solid D.
A solid D. That's right. It is, right? And now here's the thing about philanthropic partners. You have to be really considerate about the way that you approach your philanthropic partners, because what you do not want to do in a time when you're asking for feedback is make an ask. That's going to be a bit taboo, right? So you don't want to use this opportunity to steward new donors. If they don't already know you, now is not the time to be asking what you can do to get their support. Okay, you want to talk to the supporters you already have and ask them why they did the thing, not try to steward new donors in this moment. So just be careful about the way that you're approaching that particular stakeholder group to make sure that you are setting yourself up for success in future conversations. It does not at all mean that you can't ask some really pointed questions to some people that you already know, right, about those things, and even what might other people want to see from this, what other metrics would be helpful for us to share with the philanthropic community, right? You can even ask about maybe shifting priorities and their thoughts on it. That's a big conversation these days. But what you do not want to do is get into, would you fund this specific thing if we did ABC? Right? Those are feasibility study questions. And if you want to do a feasibility study, you most certainly should. And it will include community input, right? But you should not be trying to do a feasibility study in your community input for a strategic plan.
Absolutely. All right, let's get the last one.
What's going well and what they would like to see from the org in the future, our program participants. So should we ask them, how well do our internal processes support your work? How can we better communicate our impact to civic leaders? What impact has this program had on your life or your community? Or where do you see gaps in services and support in the community?
And again, we're thinking of program participants as our audience segment. And just a reminder, if you haven't already, if you register in the comments, then you click the link in the comments, you can get a recording of this and also some resources for you.
Yep.
I think we got a C.
Yeah, we got a C. That's right. Yeah. So the impact that it's had on your life, right? Now, that last one could be a good question to ask. I might not ask it exactly like that, but where do you see gaps in services or support? The only reason I wouldn't ask it like that is because it's asking so broadly about the community as opposed to them personally, right? For your program participants, you really want to be focusing on their individual experiences and then looking at the landscape of those individual experiences to try and understand what that data is telling you. So that fourth one is very valid of a question to ask, and just maybe not in that way. Yeah. Thanks for playing with us, friends.
Yes, that was fun. And now we have one last how to talk through today. And then we're going to open up for questions and comments and anything that you want to share with us. But so that last part, again, we went through audience paired with insight. Then insight informs the question that we're asking, which is what we just did. And now we want to think a little bit about how your question is going to inform the format that you choose to present that in. So we at Purpose Possible play around with many different formats. We, like Taryn and I explained earlier today, we have surveys. That's something that you send online. Usually a broad group of people get the survey link and they can submit their responses. You also have one-on-one interviews. So again, we'll schedule time to chat with a specific individual. We ask open-ended questions. It's more of a conversation guided by some questions. We also have public meetings, so that town hall, public input meetings where we're inviting a bunch of people. They come and they go. We have interactive boards like the ones that you see in that picture, and people are either using, sticky notes or markers or dot polling to kind of give their input and then come in and out. And then we also have focus groups. Some of these have been in person, some of them have been virtual. And the point behind all of this is that when you're thinking about your question, about that insight that you want to get, you can start to think about what would be the best delivery for this question. And also, how do I want the insight to be delivered to me, right? Is it a yes or no because I want some data input so that I can put it in a graph, or do I want more of a story, of an explanation behind that question, right, for that answer? So again, these are some of the formats that we work with. 3 important things. 1, play around with question formats. So within the bigger format, so let's say a survey, you can play around with how you're phrasing this question. So they can be open ended, they can be multiple choice, it can be a grading scale. Survey burnout is real, and you don't want to have a survey with 20 questions that are all open ended paragraph form, because you're less likely to get input, 20 paragraphs from someone that maybe is opening the survey on their phone. They're kind of in a rush. So try to mix it up, right? Have an open-ended question for something that you really, really want that insight for. Use a grading scale. Think about multiple choice. Um, you also want to play with sentence framing, right? Are you framing it positively? Are you framing it negatively? One of my favorite examples for the questions that sometimes we use is, instead of asking, what would you change? What are we doing wrong? We say, if you had a magic wand and you could wave and make anything be true, what would be true for this organization? Just changing the phrasing of that question is already putting your respondents in a different with a different attitude. They're reading it in a different way. So think about that, right? Think about how you're phrasing the questions. I'm also thinking for a public meeting, right? Um, Having different colors. Maybe it's not a long sentence, but are you having a map of the location, of the geographic location where your organization is at? Try to make it interactive so that people can give you data and input in different ways. And then finally, and this kind of applies to any format and any level of community feedback, is really think about molding the format to the audience. Right when we started today, I believe, Taryn, you asked the question of, what voices are we not including, but also, are we making this community feedback accessible to everyone? And I think that also speaks to the commitment, right, that you have when you collect community feedback, is to really think about the audience. Instead of pushing, I want you to fill out the survey, I want you to answer this question in a paragraph form, think about your audience. You have a program participant that has, 3 jobs, they don't have a lot of time, they're not very tech savvy. How can you mold the format to that specific audience? And that is going to help you continue to build that trust and continue to build that buy-in. Because if you're asking someone something for their input and they want to give it to you, and there's all these barriers for them to get to giving you their insight, that's going to look a little different than if you're adapting and molding to who that audience is, and that they can navigate the survey with comfort and with ease.
Yes, that could mean, did you translate it into a language that's predominant in that community? If you know you have lots of Spanish speakers, we do here in Atlanta, then did you just release the survey in English, or did you provide a Spanish speaking option so that those that speak Spanish can feel like they can participate in the survey? If you are working with students and parents and you know that they are busy, maybe you park yourself outside of a team, or even teams that you can hire. There's organizations that do that, street teams, where you can go out and go to where they are, as opposed to having to get people to come to you. Maybe you're standing at a checkout desk one day. Maybe you're outside of the dance that's happening at the right. Like, how can you meet people where they are going to be? Last example, workers, right? If you know that you are dealing with different types of workers, right? You may have people in an office building that are really going to be able to talk to you during their lunch break. So are you meeting them for lunch? Are you sending them a survey that they can do very quickly over a lunch break, versus shift workers who have different times and may also not have the bandwidth outside, right? They may not even be getting a lunch break, right? So how are you approaching them differently than those office workers, right? Really think about who it is you're talking to and meet them where they are. And if it's on a community level, pick a church in the community, pick a rec center that folks frequent, right? Where you host the public meeting or the focus group is just as important as what you do inside of it. And when you're thinking about that, not just the place that makes you feel like you're in that community, but like parking. And MARTA, if you're talking to a community that is less likely to use to use a car, right? Maybe they're in Midtown. Maybe the whole thing, when you're talking to them, they're downtown, and these are people that kind of walk where they're going, or they use MARTA or something, right? Like where are you putting this meeting so that they can get to it? And all of those things help you get that breadth of response and breadth of participation that you really do want in these functions.
Yes. And I feel like this is our bread and butter. This is what we love talking about,
Yeah.
how to make these, aside from thinking about the questions and the insight in the audience segments, is like, how are you making this truly accessible to everyone that you're asking feedback for? Because, you're asking them for their time and their energy. So, you should be thoughtful and intentional about how you're asking for that. All right. So that is it for today. I feel like we gave a lot of information. So know that you'll have the resources and the recording for this afterwards. If you have any final questions about anything that we talked about today, or the formats that we have some of this community feedback in, or anything else that Taryn and I can answer for you, we are going to hang a little bit here and see if any questions come up. I feel very happy that we did this today, Taryn.
Yes. It truly is my favorite part of really any process, program or project that we do. The community input is my favorite. I love talking to people and hearing what they have to say about whatever the topic is we're getting into.
Yeah. What has been your favorite community feedback format to do?
I really enjoy a focus group or a public meeting. Mainly because you are going to get people who come to those that would not answer your survey, that are not going to be able to sit down with for an interview. But if they know that their friends are going to be there, or they know that these other colleagues that they want to see are going to be there, then a lot of times that'll get people out. And they're just so interactive. Surveys, interviews are very much kind of, static. You're just asking questions and getting answers, but you have a lot of opportunity to play in a focus group or a public meeting, and you can gather data in lots of different ways.
Yes.
So I have a question.
Yes.
What are your top tips for incentivizing survey or focus group participation? So this can be a variety of things, but the first thing I'm going to say is don't get caught up in the numbers of response as much as you are thinking about the breadth of response, right? So when I look at how many responses I have on a survey, I'm thinking, okay, I have like 20 people here, but I also have 3 of them are board, 2 of them were from the staff, 5 of them were program participants. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I have a range of responses, and do I have that range? That's the first thing you should be looking for, and not necessarily the numbers, but do I have a wide range of perspective to take into consideration? Yeah. But if we are trying to incentivize, it's different for different groups, right? The community members and the staff and the board and the volunteers, they are already incentivized because they want the work to be better. They're already, like, your internal partners will do it because you asked, okay? And then you be considerate about the way that you're asking them to do it, okay? But those external partners, it could range from anything from that public meeting, and you're going to be able to meet a certain person, or when we've done certain community things, it's like this council member is going to be in the room, and that serves as incentive, right? And you can all go all the way up to a gift card if you have the resources and the means. Every time you click this, you go into a drawing for XYZ. Is perfectly appropriate for, like, those community members, students, parents, audience members, things like that. So it's really figuring out what your group wants and then giving that to them, or giving them an opportunity at a chance of that, if it's something like a gift card or something like that.
Yes. I love everything that you said, Taryn. All right. It looks like we are right at time. So again, thank you, Taryn. I'm happy we got to do this together. Thank you to everyone that's sending questions and comments in the chat, for participating in our little question game. And yeah, you will be able to see a recording of this and get some resources after. So thank you.
Thank you.